All right, welcome everybody to another live broadcast. So glad that you guys could be here. And I hope you guys are having a wonderful day. Today is Thursday, April the 3rd, 2025. We're going to be starting here momentarily. And as always, we're going to give people time to get on and all of that. So let's just give it a couple of moments. Let's give it about a minute, almost 2 minutes, and then we'll get started, okay? And make sure that while you're waiting, you check out our website, sambatree.com. Sambatree.com for all your health and wellness needs. Check out the website, sambatree.com. We just added a few more Samba seeded citrus boxes. Make sure you check that out. We just added a few more. We were just about sold out, but in these boxes, you're going to get about 10 to 12 pieces of seeded sweet Valencia oranges and seeded lemons, or you can go with the seeded sweet tangelos. All right, so we got about a few more boxes left because they are going fast, and we're hunting and doing all the hunting for you, and we're finding them, and so again, that's go to sambatree.com. Fresh fruit on deck, seeded fruit. Make sure you check it out, and we're sending it out, and it's been going out, it's moving out there. Check it out, okay? The website again is sambatree.com, and while you're there, check out some of the other things that we have there as well, okay? So said it was happy off Friday Eve. I would say, whoa, wait a minute. I didn't see the Eve part because I was like, is it Friday? I was like, wait a minute, because this is how this week's been. It's been one of them weeks that kind of went fast for us, or fast for me. So lots been going on, and just trying to catch up, man. I tell you, it's something. I mean, things are moving very quickly. If you didn't get a chance, check out the latest short that I uploaded. Last night I showed y'all a short. My wife and I, we were in the store, just some store nearby or whatever, and they were about to close. And so I'm just kind of walking around, and I see this robot just rolling past me. I was like, what in the world? And it was doing inventory. And the guys, I talked to the people who worked there, they say, yeah, it goes from aisle to aisle. It does it all day, and it just does inventory. And then in the owners or whatever, they're able in real time to get inventory results and all of that from their shelves and all of that. And I was like, dang, okay. So I tell you, this thing's moving. The short, that was last night. Today I uploaded a short, and it was a guy who, his company basically, the way he has restructured his company to where all the department heads are now AI. So all the people now, they have to answer to AI, to these AI bots that he created. And if you have any questions as an employee, he was saying that they can just easily message, the department heads and be able to communicate with them if they have any questions or need directions and all of that. And yeah, so the companies now are right now before our eyes, they're literally restructuring. And this is why we're telling people, hey, listen, you better be, a lot of people use that term, be woke, stay woke. I mean, you literally need to be abreast on these things. And this is not the time to be like, oh, that's just the young folk. No, you need to learn at least some of this. It's not overwhelming. It's only overwhelming for people who aren't prepared. If you're not preparing, then yeah, it's going to be overwhelming for you. But that's why we established here Samba University. And this is it right here. And we have a class that we're going to be teaching on the 13th of this month, the 13th of April. And it's called Chat GPT for Grown Folks. And you're not going to want to miss it. It's $30 a person. and you're going to get a little booklet, a PDF booklet that you can download, and you can use that at any time. It's going to be chock full of a lot of things. This is going to be taught from the perspective of people of a certain age, and you just want to get your feet wet in it. And I'm going to try my best not to overwhelm you, but there's just a lot that we, even on the basic level, if this is not something that you're not familiar with, or you just kind of been dipping and dabbling with it, this is going to be something that you're going to definitely want to stay plugged into. If you're someone who, for example, you're looking for, how to do research, how to use this tool to do basic research on things. This is going to be a class for you. If you're looking for the basics on how to start a business using AI, this is going to be a class for you. How to do effective prompting. They call it prompt engineering, but like I said, that's a big fancy word for how to actually ask the right questions. You know what I mean? And we'll be taking you through that, and it'll be a bunch of examples that we'll go through. It'll be lab time where you'll just go through it. It's not going to be, fast paced like that. We're going to do it, at our own pace. When you get a certain age, you're like, wait a minute now, you can't, I'm at the age right now, I'm like, why all these young people always mumbling? I'm trying to understand what what you say? You know what I mean? You got to keep it plain for me, and I don't care. I'll keep asking until it's clear for me. Okay, so it ain't about being old. That's just, you need to learn how to communicate. You know what I mean? And that's, hopefully I'll be able to achieve that with y'all. This is going to be, I'm going to try to make it as fun as possible, but very informative, and have something set up where you kept in a loop where if you need support or you have questions or whatever, I'm trying to figure that out right now, and how we can do that. So it's something that'll be, there for you anytime you need help. We'll also be having classes coming up of AI Digital Artwork 101. That will be coming up soon. And also we'll have one on AI music. And we'll be talking about that. That will be these are just basic things. And even though this class here is going to be focused on ChatGPT, we'll also be looking at some of the other similar platforms as well. So, you'll get that as well. Same thing with this, we'll be looking at other multiple platforms. So it's not just one platform, but the base would be ChatGPT. All right. So we'll be talking about that, and make sure if you're interested, go ahead and sign up for it, because before you know it, it's going to be April 13th, and we're going to keep moving. All right. All right. So in today's broadcast, with all that being said, we're going to get into something I posted about earlier today. It's kind of a continuation of what we were talking about in the last broadcast that we did, as far as going through and actually looking at the influence of a certain particular group, that you have to, unfortunately, on this platform and in this society, for that most part, you got to act like you got to walk on eggshells. It's like you can't, you got to be careful and all that. I'm like, no, we got to be honest and truthful, and, just like with anything else, you know what I mean? Be respectful, but we're going to have to tell the truth. And that's what we did in that broadcast. So this is the broadcast I'm referring to right here. It's this one, Wake Up. There is no we got next, because there's a lot of black folks that are deceived and think that somehow just because you're hearing things like birth rates are going down amongst white people, wars and the stock market is going down and all of that. You got a lot of black folks that are out here literally rubbing their hands and doing the Birdman hand rub and thinking that, okay, we got next. But we had to be honest in that video and say, hey, listen, no. Are we preparing for we got next? And we had to look at some things. We had to take a hard look at a lot of things. It doesn't work that way. Are you preparing for it, or do you think that it's going to be a Thanos snap and all of a sudden you're going to be sitting in the king's chair? No, it doesn't work that way at all. It's never worked like that in history. All right. So take a look at that video when you get a chance. So anyway, what we're doing today is, like I mentioned, there's a post that I did today over on our community page, but I'll also put it on our blog too, where there's videos, additional videos I was able to add, so you could check it out on your own and all of that. But we're going to actually go through that today. So let me bring this up here. This is the post that I was referring to right here. I know it's quite lengthy or whatever, but there's a lot, and so this is the post right here. And so now what I'm going to do is let me, and at the top right here, you see, I said, if you want to see the shareable version of it, go ahead and click on this and this will take you to the blog. Okay. So it'll just take you right here. So we're going to go through this. We're going to start in South Africa, and then we're going to go from South Africa to where we are today on this. Now, if you take note of the title of this video, we talk about the chosen. And there's a particular group that we're talking about that refers to themselves as the chosen people. And what we're going to look at is how they have been an influence in any time you have seen black folks fighting for rights, they show up. You're going to see this happen. And so and they in the background are pulling levers and things like that. So I thought it would be an interesting take to start in South Africa. And then from there, we'll move over here to the United States, and I'll show you how it's all connected and why you definitely need to understand this, because it is something that has planted itself in our brains, in our psyche. And we find ourselves repeating a lot of things, but we're just repeating things, but we don't really know where these things came from. All we know is white people are the devil, and we got to hate white people. We got to hate them because of what they did and all of that. And this is not about saying that white people are I'm talking about historically haven't done anything towards black folks, because that's not true at all. So we're not saying that, but we want to be accurate with what we're talking about. You know what I mean? And that's what I'm about here. So anyway, again, shout out to everybody in the chat. So let's go ahead and get into it, because I don't want to waste too much of your time, and let's go. Okay. So let's go. In this post, we are going to walk through how the chosen used divide and conquer strategies in South Africa. The first thing that needs to be established, and you'll see why in a little bit, is the origins of Marxism. Now, Marxism is a socio-political theory that sees society through the lens of classism while advocating for uniformity amongst all in the general population. The problem is that, like all other similar ideologies, the enforcers of such policies are usually the ones who most benefit, resulting in a two-tier system, them versus everyone else. And this is a quote, direct quote by Rabbi Harry Watson. Take a listen to this. And this is what he said. He said the Jews should welcome this revolution in the Christian world, and the Jews should show an example. It is not an accident that Judaism gave birth to Marxism. Let me read that again. It is not an accident that Judaism gave birth to Marxism. And it is not an accident that the Jews readily took up Marxism. All this was in perfect accord with the progress of Judaism and the Jews. And this is a quote from the book called A Program for the Jews and an Answer to All Anti-Semites by Rabbi Harry Watson. You can look the book up. They wrote it. So don't get mad at me, y'all. This is what they said in their books. I told you they outline all this stuff all the time. They talk very openly about it. Okay, so anytime you see Marxism come up, and I'm saying Marxism / communism, you will find these people. Period. You will find these people. Now, some people will try to make the argument and say, well, they weren't practicing Jews. They weren't practicing Judaism or whatever. And you do have a lot of Jews that were in these movements who claim to be atheists, or they didn't practice Jews. They weren't Orthodox Jews or whatever. You do have that. But at the end of the day, they still were allegiant to each other. They were very in lockstep with each other, period. Okay. Let's move on. No matter how much spinning people may try to do, it doesn't erase the fact that the founder of Marxism was, in fact, a Jewish man by the name of Karl Marx. Now, I talked about this before, but we're going to go, I'm just going to prove it to you. Marx's family was originally non-religious Jewish, but had converted formally to Christianity before his birth. His maternal grandfather was a Dutch rabbi, while his paternal line had supplied Trier rabbis since 1723, a role taken by his grandfather, Meyer Halevi Marx. His father was the first in the line to receive a secular education. He became a lawyer with a comfortably upper middle class income, and his family owned a number of Moselle vineyards. In addition to his income as an attorney, prior to his son's birth and after the abrogation of Jewish emancipation in Rhineland, Heinrich converted from Judaism to join the state evangelical church of Persia. You will see a lot of Jews actually did that. There was a lot of conversions going on where they said, okay, I'm gonna become a Christian now and all of that, right? But again, they still kept that tie to their belief system. It was beyond just I'm a practicing Jew versus I'm not one. They rolled thick together, all right? And you'll see this all throughout history. So Marxism, and you can add communism, is a Jewish ideology. All right. So number two, the introduction of Marxist throughout. I meant to say Marxism throughout thought. Sorry, back up. The introduction of Marxist thought can be traced to the growth of industrial capitalism in South Africa, particularly with the discovery of diamonds in 1867 and gold in 1866. Now, I want to make sure you're paying attention. That's why I put the little black fingers there. When they're pointing, that means you better pay close attention to this. Let me read that part again. The introduction of Marxist thought can be traced to the growth of industrial capitalism in South Africa, particularly with the discovery of diamonds in 1867 and gold in 1886, which spurred urbanization and the rise of a black working class. As black laborers were funneled into the mines and factories under brutal conditions, the seeds of class consciousness took root. Early labor movements though initially focused on immediate workplace grievances, began intersecting with socialist ideals brought by European immigrants, some of whom were radicals fleeing persecution or spreading revolutionary thought. Now, note the discoveries. As I said, the discoveries, I'm talking about the diamonds and the gold. All right. And the date. All right. Continuing. These three men, the three men who are credited for quote unquote discovering diamonds and gold in South Africa was Cecil John Rhodes, Barney Barnado. His birth name was Barnett Isaacs, and Alfred Beat. Both Barnado and Beat were Jewish. Rhodes was not Jewish, but was financially backed by the Rothschilds. It was with the help of the Rothschilds, Rhodes was able to buy out Barnado. Both Rhodes and Beat also led the way in the gold industry. A few other players came into the picture, but for the most part were outmuscled. So documented history shows us that both of these industries were firmly Jewish controlled. All right. Are y'all with me? Are you tracking with me? Am I going too fast? All right. Just let me know. So here we have around the same time at the launching of these industries, the birth of a Jewish ideology in that region that claimed to represent the grievances of the workers. And who were the workers? Black South Africans. But who were Black South Africans working for? Gold and diamond mine owners who owned the mines. Are y'all tracking with me? So here you had The Jewish people came in. It was like, oh, we got diamonds and gold now. Now, the people that lived there, they been knowing about that, right? But they came in and said, oh, we're going to make this into a whole industry. And they said, well, we need people to do the work. Oh, let's use all the black folks that are already here. Let's get them in the mines. Well, as you can imagine, the way they were treated was horrible. And this goes on, bad treatment of workers. When it goes with these people throughout much of history. We've talked about the garment district. The garment district, when you look at the history of the garment district in places like New York in the Northeast, and how they called them sweatshops. Well, there was a reason why they called them that. It was because how these people were being poorly treated. And when you look at the owners of these sweatshops, guess who shows up again? The same people. When you go down to the South, where were those sweatshops, the garment district, where were they getting their cotton? They were getting it from the South. Well, who was in the South running many of these plantations? There we go again. And how were they treating the workers of these plantations? They were treating them very bad, weren't they? Okay, so this goes on. Once you start following history, you'll start seeing these same things pop up over and over again. But for now, we're going to stay in South Africa. Then we're going to jump the lake and come here to America. All right. So I just wanted to point this out. So here you had, so far, you got the Jews came in South Africa. They said, okay, we're going to run this, the gold and the diamond mines. We're going to run that. We're going to bring in these native black South Africans, and we're going to throw them in the mines and work them to death, right? So, of course, naturally, there was an outcry against that. But don't worry. They saw what was going on. They said, okay, we need to subvert this. So what we're going to do is that we're going to bring in a movement that supposedly is going to represent their grievances. And the name of that movement was Marxism. Okay. And then communism and all, it's pretty much the same. I mean, there are differences, but they're both the same Jewish ideologies at the end of the day. All right. So anyway, let's move along. Number 3, let me see where I am. Okay, I named that. Let me start with number 3 again. I said some of the names of the early influencers who helped push Marxist communist ideology in South Africa was Joe Slovo, Ruth First, Sidney Bunting, who was not himself Jewish, but his wife Rebecca Notolowitz were Jewish. On the flip, people like David Ivan Jones, Bill or William Andrews, were non-Jews who were deeply entrenched in these ideologies. Like I think it was David Ivan Jones. Like he spent a great deal of time like went to Russia. I mean, he was like right at the cusp and just getting their information. And so you see a lot of this too. It wasn't 100% Jews that was running this, but because you also had white people that, they felt like this was something that resonated with them as well. So they were working hand in hand with these people. All right, let's go. And then I said, are you seeing the play yet? This was the establishment of a controlled opposition. All right, let's go. The Communist Party of South Africa, that's the CPSA, founded in 1921, played a pivotal role in formalizing this connection. Influenced by the Russian Revolution of 1917 and the global spread of Leninism, the CPSA explicitly linked racial oppression to capitalist exploitation, arguing that the liberation of black South Africans required dismantling both. All right. What are they dismantling? White supremacy. It's the white supremacy we got to dismantle. What's the problem of black folks? Why can't we move ahead? It's white supremacy. That's what it is. We got to dismantle white supremacy. Doesn't that sound familiar? Well, now you're finding out where this came from. So these people came in and immediately told these black folks, they took them by the head and said, look, don't look at us. Look at them. They are the ones that are doing this. Now, again, you did have white people who were participating in the oppression of black South Africans. I'm not saying it didn't happen. It did. But who was fueling this stuff? Okay. Anyway, let's move on. Let's see. This resonated with many black activists, especially as the party adopted a Native Republic thesis in 1928, calling for black majority rule, a radical stance at the time. The CPSA attracted a diverse membership, including black intellectuals and workers, despite facing repression from the state. The ANC, or the African National Congress, formed in 1912, initially leaned towards moderate liberalism, petitioning for inclusion within the existing system. However, in 1940 and 1950, as apartheid hardened and peaceful appeals failed, younger ANC leaders like Nelson Mandela, Walter Sisulu, and Oliver Tambo grew receptive to Marxist ideas. The ANC alliance with the South African Communist Party and the CPSA successor after banning in 1950 solidified this shift. The SACP provided ideological training, organizational support, and a framework for armed struggle through the, I'm not going to even try to say that, but it's right here. It's right here. All right. Yeah. Co-founded by Mandela in 1961. Soviet and Eastern Bloc support, financial, military, and educational furthered entrenched communist influence as thousands of black South African exiles trained in places like Moscow. Now, again, you had black South Africans that were getting trained by Moscow, but understand, Russia at that time was under communist control. It was communist. So a lot of those communists that were running Russia at that time, they were, in fact, very favorable to Judaism. They were Jews. A lot of these people, that's what they were. So they were taking black South Africans and, again, establishing relationships with them and saying, hey, we understand, brother, we understand where you stand. We understand the struggle and all of that. And they were equipping them and all of that. Gee, this sounds kind of familiar. That sounds kind of familiar, doesn't it? That sounds kind of like what they did in America, didn't it? Oh, I'm getting ahead of myself. But anyway, let's move on. These ideologies gave birth to political parties like the EFF, and that's where you'll find people like Julius Malema, and I'm getting ready to show you some videos of him, and the ANC. Here is Julius Malema, leader of the EFF, the Economic Freedom Fighters, acknowledging who bankrolls the organization. Now, you can look the tweet up. I didn't put it here, but I've shown it many times. It's actually here. Hold on. Here's this tweet right here. Anti-Semitism is hatred, prejudice, and or hostility towards Jews. What's this part here? Some of our biggest financial donors are Jewish, and we love them. He said that. Now, this is him right here. This is no AI or nothing like that. No, this is Julius Malema. This is him showing up. This is him. All of that smoke he has towards whites. But you will find out he has nothing to say about the group, this other group. Nothing. Now, this is Julius Malema. This is him. He's literally like throwing black lawyers, because, you know, like any political group, they're going to have a team of lawyers representing them, right? Well, here's what he's doing. He's throwing his black lawyers under the bus. But notice who he's giving praise to. Let me play this video.
The EFF, when they wake up every morning, these are the same people. When they want to send CVs to government, when they want to send CVs to Oppenheimer, they write bad about the EFF. And then wake up one morning wanting to give you the lawyers who must represent you. Ian Levitt attorneys are attorneys of record. They are paid every month to represent the EFF everywhere. And they've done it so well. So why should we complain? We must hate them today because they are white. When we were losing cases with black lawyers, failing to submit the simplest thing like a one page.
So this is the same Julius Malema who is singing "Kill the White Man." Yeah, him and the EFF, they're singing "Kill the White Man," but guess what? We're going to make sure we got Jewish lawyers. Do you see the play that's happening right here? Kill the white man, but we love our Jewish lawyers, but the black lawyers that were actually, what it sounds like was, he said, they were the black lawyers, they were saying bad things about us. Do you see the wordplay that's happening here?
And then we must use the same services, lose cases so that we can be projected as the most disorganized organization with no direction. To hell with all of you. If Vonyo Malema hates white people, Vonyo Malema hates white people. When Malema uses white people, Malema uses white people. You can go to hell.
Okay. Anyway, now this is Malema again. He's actually making a connection, saying that he himself has Jewish ancestry. Let's take a listen to this.
Bashabi is not vendors. Bashabi is the black Jews who came from Israel, landed in Yemen, and then spread all over the world. They are found in Zimbabwe. They are found in Karanaland, in Zambia. They are found everywhere else. But because they come from Israel, everywhere else where they settle, they assume the language of those people. So because they came from the north, they ended up, majority of them, in South Africa, being in Venda. So because they are found in their majority in Venda, a lot of people assume they are vendors, but that is not the case. Oh, yes.
So just tell us.
So you find Bashabis in the Pedis, Bumatale, Burameti, Bumalema. So Kasal Matale, the deputy Minister of Police, is Mshabi as well, but he's a Pedi speaking person.
So does that explain your close relationship?
Yes, we are relatives because as the black Jews, wherever we find each other, we embrace one another, support each other, defend each other, and share a lot of ideas together. So that's what brought us together.
All right. He's sitting up here telling it. Now, some of y'all, you dancing a jig now. Yeah, that's right. He's acknowledging that we're the real Hebrews. Yeah, but if you listen to these Africans that claim that, they will tell you, yeah, we're Jews. We're connected to the Jews. The Jews that y'all over here are saying that they're the fake ones. But no, we don't say that. No, they are brothers. They are brothers. These are our brothers. These are our sisters. We're all part of one big family. That's what they're saying. And I try to raise this point and always point this out to people who are latching on to that, but they leave that part out. I'm saying, no. Hear them out. Listen to what they're saying. They are saying that they're not calling these people in the state of Israel. They are not saying that they are the fake people. They're not saying that. They are saying, no, we are an extended family. That's our people. That's what they're saying. So if you have someone in leadership that's thinking this way, he's going to be too blind to see the game that's being played on their people. And this is the same thing that's happening here. And when we get to the United States, we'll talk about that a little bit, the Hebrew Israelite movement and what my thoughts were on that. We'll talk about that, but and how that's being used. But anyway, let's move on. Let's see. I said, so let's break for a moment and look at the game pieces. So let's stop because there's a lot that was just thrown at you. So let's look at the game pieces here. So we have Jews controlling the gold and diamond industries. We have Jews bringing in an ideology that claimed to represent the black workers. Now, what about the white South African government? What about them? Well, now that brings us to number 4. From the article Brothers in Arms, Israel's Secret Pact with Pretoria, we read the following. We created the South African arms industry. Listen to this. Listen to this. We created the South African arms industry, says Leon. They assisted us to develop all kinds of technology because we had a lot of money. When we were developing things together, we usually gave the know-how and they gave the money. After 1976, there was a love affair between the security establishments of the two countries and their armies. And the two countries they're talking about is South Africa and Israel. All right. And it says, we were involved in Angola as consultants, we meaning Israel, as consultants to the South African army. You had Israeli officers there cooperating with the army. The link was very intimate. Alongside the state-owned factories turning out material for South Africa was Kibbutz Biet Alpha, which alongside the state-owned factories turning out material for developed a profitable industry selling anti-riot vehicles for use against protesters in black townships. So Israel was providing apartheid government vehicles and equipment and training during that time. I've mentioned that many times here. I don't know if y'all know that. Israel stood side by side with the apartheid South African government all the way to the very end. Today, we have South African farmers who are receiving training from, guess who? Israeli Special Forces. All right, and this is from a Newsweek article. After the South African parliament adopted a motion in February to potentially take land from white South African farmers and redistribute it to predominantly black workers without compensation, farmers have feared an increase in violence targeting their community. Aiden Abelnik, a former soldier with the Israeli Special Forces, has offered his services to train farmers to protect themselves. And then that's the link there if you want to read the rest of that. All right. So right here it says, so the black versus white conflict that we are seeing today are two sides that are being led by the same small group of people. Meanwhile, South Africa continues to be sucked dry of their gold and diamonds. I'm trying to tell y'all, this is how, so as you can see, this is how they came in and they literally did the whole divide and conquer. So when you're hearing all of this talk about how, they got to get rid of the white farmers and, it's the white farmers, they're taking over, the white farmers this, the white farmers that, and the white farmers this. The EFF and the ANC, you notice they won't say anything about the people who own those gold and diamond mines, won't they? If they were to focus just on that, they can turn the economy of South Africa around just like that. But it's the poor, it's the farmers we got to go after. Now you understand how they are being directed and where it came from. Now, this is an interesting video that I came across. This guy here, he's going to be explaining some things here. So take a listen to what this guy has to say.
Now, onto the question of South Africa. And while it is on they are responding to the mere call of humanity when they are seeing the scale of suffering in Gaza. But in addition to that, you have to remember that historically, the apartheid regime's closest ally was always Israel, even when much of the international community had turned on the apartheid rule there. So, for example, the first foreign prime minister to visit Tel Aviv following the Nakba of 1948 was, of course, Daniel Malan, who was apartheid South Africa's prime minister. And he was somebody with a past as a supporter of the Nazis. Regardless of that, Israel rolled out the red carpet for this individual. In addition to that, Henrik Verwoerd, who was credited as the architect of apartheid in South Africa and also a prime minister of South Africa, claimed in 1961 that Israel, like South Africa, is an apartheid state. This was 6 decades before Amnesty International said the same thing. And even once international opinion began to turn, Israel and South Africa established a joint secretariat for political and psychological warfare in 1975. We also know that in the case of the nuts and bolts way in which apartheid functioned, as late as 1981, you had 200 Israeli military advisors based in South Africa, and hundreds of troops of the apartheid in South Africa were educated in Israeli military academies. In addition to that, Israel had military instructors on hand providing direct guidance to the South African Reconnaissance Commando's elite unit, which was responsible for hunting down and killing those who resisted apartheid. Elbit Systems, which is Israel's largest arms company and today is besieged in the country I am in thanks to the heroic activity of Palestine Action, it played a key role in the development of South Africa's military electronics industry. Also, the naval forces of apartheid were trained by the Israelis and sold radar systems by ELTA, a subsidiary of the state-owned Israeli aerospace industries. Israel was also essential to the construction of the electric wall to police the border of apartheid South Africa, and it had a crew of 50 Israeli technicians who were stationed permanently at the wall for maintenance. And the building of that wall included planting radar devices and minefields along the border. We also look at some of the assassinations that the apartheid intelligence agency boss ran in the country. They included a letter bomb campaign that killed ANC figures like Ruth First, herself a Jewish woman.
So I'm telling you, they play both sides. Now, Ruth First, she was one that what was she pushing? She was pushing Marxism. So again, they see even themselves as being expendable to sell the bottom line, and that is total whatever over the situation, control over the situation. So they're working both sides of this. You understand? So anyway, so hopefully you understand that. So we just went through South Africa and their history, how Marxism really, for black folks, it really got its launch. It launched there, but it was also launching somewhere else. Okay. And so what happened now is those same Jews who were Marxist, they moved somewhere else. They came to America. All right. So now with that being said, I have a video. I'm trying to think which one do I start with first. I will start off with, I might skip on this one. I might skip through some of this. But this one will explain to you what they were doing here in America. And then from there, we're going to get to, talking about how black folks started embracing this Marxist ideologies and all that. We're going to get into that. Okay, so this is a 20-minute video, but like I said, I might skip through it. Okay, so let's go ahead and plug this in and let's take a listen.
For the first time, Americans today are not free to say what they think. If they say something deemed offensive or insensitive or, worst of all, hate speech, they may be in serious trouble. They may be punished for violating the unholy commandments of the 90s, commonly known as political correctness. But is political correctness a new phenomenon? We'll show you tonight that political correctness has been in the making for more than 8 decades. And it seems that a deteriorating society is exactly what political correctness strives for. But just what is political correctness? As you're about to see, political correctness is nothing less than a Marxist ideology. Marxism translated from economic into cultural terms in an effort going back not to the 1960s, but to World War I. Marxist theory had predicted that if war came to Europe, the working class in every European country would rise in revolt. But that theory proved wrong. When the First World War began in 1914, the workers' loyalty to their country proved stronger than their so-called class consciousness. They willingly put on their uniforms, French or German, Austrian or Russian or British, and marched off by the millions to fight each other. In 1917, a Marxist revolution did occur in Russia, but it failed to spread to Western Europe, again contradicting orthodox Marxist theory. At the war's end, Marxist theorists had to confront the question, what had gone wrong? Antonio Gramsci in Italy and Georg Lukács in Hungary believed they had the answer. Gramsci and Lukács argued that Western culture had blinded the working class to its true Marxist class interests. Before a Marxist revolution could take place, Western culture had to be destroyed. In 1919, Lukács, who was considered the most brilliant Marxist theorist since Marx himself, asked, "Who will save us from Western civilization?" That same year, 1919, Lukács became Deputy Commissar for Culture in the Bolshevik Bela Kun government in Hungary, where he launched a program of cultural terrorism. As part of that program, Lukács introduced a radical sex education program into the Hungarian schools. Political correctness, as we know it, was already beginning to take form.
All right, you tracking with them now? So they went over there, they went into that country, and they got into the schools. And then what did they start teaching in the schools? Sex education. This is not new, y'all. This stuff is not new. It's not new. This has been going on for a very long time. And we're now just dealing with it. But this has been going on for a very long time. And let me go ahead and let them.
He tried to actually undermine the unity of the family, and that was one of the reasons that he tried to introduce sex education.
Laszlo Pastor, a leader in the Hungarian resistance against the communist takeover of Hungary after World War II, explains why children were targeted.
It's always much tougher to convert an adult, to do something what he was taught not to do.
The program left great residual effects on Hungary.
The only thing what we were permitted to accept as far as culture is concerned, what they were teaching, that was it. Free thinking was a very big sin.
The Bela Kun government lasted only a few months, in part because the Hungarian working class was outraged by Georg Lukács's assault on traditional Western culture. But meanwhile, in Germany, a new attempt to create a Marxist critique of Western culture was taking shape. There, the wealthy young son of a millionaire grain trader, Felix Weil, wanted to establish a public policy institute, a think tank, to serve as a home for advanced Marxist thought. Modeled on the Marx-Engels Institute in Moscow, Weil's think tank was originally to be named the Institute for Marxism. Martin Jay, chairman of the history department at Berkeley, an author of a history of the Frankfurt School, explains why the name was changed to the Institut für Sozialforschung, the Institute for Social Research.
But I think they were very interested in trying to avoid being overly labeled. So it's a fairly bland name, the Institute of Social Research.
The Institute was affiliated with Frankfurt University in Frankfurt, Germany, and in time became known simply as the Frankfurt School. The Frankfurt School formally opened its doors on June 22, 1924, but it had already held its first seminar on theory in the spring of 1923. There, almost 24 Marxist scholars gathered for what Weil, the sponsor, called a Marxist study week. One of the participants was Richard Sorge, later a famous Soviet spy. Another was Georg Lukács. Lukács's writings on culture were the basis for much of the program. Almost half of the participants in this Marxist study week would later be affiliated with the Frankfurt School.
Sorry, I keep cutting in here, but just about everybody you see in that picture are Jewish. They're the ones that brought this Marxism ideology over. And they established the Frankfurt School. Okay. I think the Frankfurt School is that Columbia University? Hold on for a second. Hold on. Frankfurt. Oh gosh, come on, man. Frank School. No. Hold on, y'all. Frankfurt School. Yeah. Sorry, y'all. Sorry about that. I should have had myself. Yes, Columbia University. The Frankfurt School is at Columbia University. Now, why am I mentioning this? I'm mentioning this because if you notice all these protests that have been happening on college campuses. And notice I just said college campuses. It's actually mainly happening at Columbia University. Gee, I wonder why it's only mainly happening on Columbia University's campus, where we're seeing shown to us over and over again. Oh my God, these college students now, you got the people that are pro-Palestinian versus the people that are pro-Israel and all of that. And it's all being played right on the front stage of the Frankfurt School. I hope y'all tracking with me. Anyway, let it continue to play here.
Following Lukács's lead, the Frankfurt School would be the vehicle that translated Marxism from economic into cultural terms, giving us what we now know as political correctness. The Frankfurt School's first director was an Austrian Marxist economist, Karl Grünberg. Grünberg's principal effort was to firmly establish the Institute's Marxist nature. In his inaugural address, which opened the Institute's new building in Frankfurt, Grünberg said,
"It has been our intention here from the outset to maintain uniformity in the way we look at problems and go about solving them. I too am one of the opponents of the economic, social and legal order which has been handed down to us from history, and I too am one of the supporters of Marxism. In the new research institute, Marxism will from now on have a home."
Under Karl Grünberg, the Frankfurt School worked mostly on economic questions and the labor movement, conventional Marxist subjects. But in 1930, Grünberg was replaced as director by a young Marxist intellectual with very different ideas, Max Horkheimer. Horkheimer quickly began to use the Institute to develop a new Marxism, very different from the Marxism of the Soviet Union. First, recognizing the economic success of capitalism, Horkheimer announced that revolution was unlikely to come from the working class. The Frankfurt School would have to find a substitute.
Well, this was the great question. The great question is there a surrogate for the working class?
The Frankfurt School would not find an answer to this question until the 1960s. But meanwhile, Horkheimer moved to revive Lukács's work by making the culture, not the economy, the central focus of the Frankfurt School's work. As Martin J. writes in his History of the Frankfurt School, The Dialectical Imagination, if it can be said that in the early years of its history, the Institute concerned itself primarily with an analysis of bourgeois society's socio-economic substructure, in the years after 1930, its prime interest lay in its cultural superstructure. Indeed, the traditional Marxist formula regarding the relationship between the two was called into question. The key to the Frankfurt School's work on culture was the crossing of Marx with Freud. Just as classical economic Marxism argued that under capitalism, the working class was oppressed, so the Frankfurt School used Freud to argue that under Western culture, everyone lived in a constant state of psychological repression.
So that there were radical Freudians during this period who had hopes of using psychoanalysis to end what Reich had called sexual alienation, which they saw as significant as economic alienation.
The solution, according to the Frankfurt School, was not just a political revolution to overthrow capitalism, but a social and cultural revolution as well. To further the Institute's work on cultural issues, Horkheimer brought in some new blood. The new members included a sometime music critic, Theodore Adorno. Martin J. sees this edition as critical.
Well, Adorno was perhaps the most fecund and, I think, brilliant of all the members of the Frankfurt School.
Another new member was Erich Fromm. Fromm, a practicing psychoanalyst, was noted for his radical Marxist social psychology. He pioneered the concept of sexual liberation and gender politics. According to Martin J., in Fromm's view, masculinity and femininity were not reflections of essential sexual differences. They were derived instead from differences in life functions, which were in part socially determined.
Sorry, I'm cutting it again. So you see the people that bring it in. Everyone they're mentioning are Jewish. Everyone they're mentioning, these are all Jewish people. Sigmund Freud, when they mention him, Sigmund Freud, he actually is credited as the founder of psychoanalysts. And so he is one that the whole sexual revolution thing and all of that. Sigmund Freud, who's also Jewish. Well, guess who Sigmund Freud cousin was? Eric Bernays, the guy who's the founder of modern marketing, not Marxism, marketing. Eric Bernays, he was a marketing genius. Well, his cousin was Sigmund Freud. So they would share notes oftentimes on, Sigmund Freud oftentimes would be looking over his shoulder like, okay, what is it that resonates with people and gets them to buy things or whatever? And then Bernays, he would go back and find out information from him and all of that and how to manipulate people. I'm going to bring this all home in a moment but I'm just giving you more backdrop so you can understand. So when we start getting it, when we touch on like the Black Panthers and all of that, now you got the history of where all this stuff comes from. All right, so let's go ahead and continue.
Another piece of political correctness was falling into place. In 1932, Herbert Marcuse became a member of the Institute for Social Research. Marcuse would ultimately become the most important member of the Frankfurt School for the development of political correctness. In the 1950s and 60s, Marcuse would complete the translation of Marxism into cultural terms and inject it into the New Left. Martin J. sums it up.
In which Marcuse in the United States represented the most radical inclinations of the school, in a sense continuing the work they had done in the 1920s and into the 30s, a work that was inspired by Marxist Hegelian philosophy, very interested in the crisis both of capitalism and liberal democracy, trying to find alternatives to the working class.
As we've seen, the Frankfurt School, Marxist in origin, wanted to create a cultural revolution against Western society. And in the 1930s, they took their important first step. In the 1930s, the work of Horkheimer, Adorno, Fromm, and Marcuse issued in its first tangible product, critical theory. The term critical theory is something of a play on words. One is tempted to ask, what is the theory? The answer is, the theory is to criticize. Through unremitting, destructive criticism of every institution of Western society, they hope to bring that society down. Critical theory is the basis for gay studies, black studies, women's studies, and various other studies departments found on American university campuses today. These departments are the home base of political correctness. David Horowitz was present at the birth of campus political correctness.
Well, I was a radical in the 60s. I was a Marxist. My buddies were people like Tom Hayden. I edited the largest magazine of the left at the time, Ramparts. But the Frankfurt School was important in Marxism because they no longer believed really in the future. They only believed in destroying capitalism and destroying, bourgeois democracy is what we would have called it. And if you look at today's campuses, that kind of nihilism is really the dominant theme. That is, attack America.
The Frankfurt School was careful never to define what critical theory was for, only what it was against. Again, Martin Jay, the Frankfurt School's semi-official historian.
Critical theory itself always felt reluctant about being put in the straitjacket of systematization and defied its reduction to a simple definition.
Critical theory actually attempted to politicize logic itself. Horkheimer wrote, "Logic is not independent of content. That means an argument is logical if it helps destroy Western culture, illogical if it supports it." Such twisted thought lies at the heart of the political correctness now inculcated into American university students.
When there's 1% of the campus is conservative and the other 9%, and the other 9% of the people who care are incredibly liberal, you're going to get something approaching a socialist state.
But how did the work of a small group of German Marxist intellectuals come to America?
Eine wahrhaftige Weltanschauungsgott sein.
In 1933, when the Nazis came to power in Germany, the Institute for Social Research fled. It fled to New York City, where it was reestablished that same year with help from the president of Columbia University. Once in America, the Frankfurt School gradually shifted the focus of its work from destroying German society and culture to attacking the society and culture of its new place of refuge. Not only did they apply critical theory to American society, they added some new elements. One was the Institute's so-called Studies in Prejudice, which culminated in 1950 in Theodore Adorno's immensely influential book, The Authoritarian Personality. In it, Adorno argued that the American people possessed many fascist traits, and that anyone who supported traditional American culture was psychologically unbalanced. It is no accident that today, the politically correct are quick to label their opponents fascists and suggest that they need psychological treatment in the form of sensitivity training.
People over profits! People over profits!
The Frankfurt School even integrated political correctness' most fashionable cause, environmentalism, into their cultural Marxism, by way of Horkheimer and Adorno's book, Dialectic of Enlightenment.
Well, they were very interested in what was called the domination of nature. Dialectic of Enlightenment in particular moved the emphasis away from economic domination to the species domination of the natural world, including, we might say, internal nature through psychoanalytic understanding of repression. So they were very keen on recognizing that we needed to have a more nurturant and a more, let's say, balanced relationship between humankind and the natural world.
After World War II, Horkheimer and Adorno returned to Germany, where the Institute was reestablished at Frankfurt University. But not all the old members of the Institute returned. Fatefully, Herbert Marcuse remained in America, eventually becoming a professor at Brandeis and University of California, San Diego. Marcuse labored to finish the intellectual work begun by Horkheimer, Adorno, and Fromm in the 1930s.
Marcuse, on the other hand, remained in the United States, and during the 50s and 60s developed some of their earlier ideas, merging Freud and Marx, interested in aesthetics and interested in cultural, let's say, tendencies towards what he would call negation, which were usable in a campaign to call into question the what Antonio Gramsci would have called hegemony of capitalist bourgeois culture. And Marcuse became, of course, the so-called guru of the New Left.
It was Marcuse who finally answered the question posed by Horkheimer in the early 30s. Who could substitute for the working class as an agent of revolution?
So you had to find some new constituency, whether it was students or blacks or women or gays or whatever it was. And Marcuse had a fluid Marxism that fit into this.
Martin Jay confirms the role of the Frankfurt School in creating the victim groups that constitute the politically correct coalition.
But the working class wouldn't play the hegemonic role that traditional Marxism had expected from it. And so students, blacks, other minority groups, women, and so forth were, they hoped at least, able to come together.
Of critical importance for the injection of the Frankfurt School's work into the student rebellion of the 1960s was Marcuse's revival of Fromm's notion of sexual liberation.
Marcuse, however, was the main conduit of ideas. But Marcuse had written one important work in the 1950s called Eros and Civilization, a work which attempted to rub Freud against the grain and come out with a radical, even utopian reading of psychoanalysis. And that, combined with Norman O'Brown's Life Against Death, had a great impact on the counterculture and on emphasizing a libidinal element.
Marcuse's Eros and Civilization condemned all restrictions on sexual behavior, calling instead for polymorphous perversity.
Instead, it argues that at certain early developmental levels of the human psyche, there was a potential for sexual expression, sexual pleasure, which had not yet been organized into the restricted notions of heterosexual sexuality, and that these had some sort of capacity to be reinvigorated.
Polymorphous perversity helped open the door to aspects of political correctness, such as gay liberation.
This was his idea of what human society, a good human society, should be based on, was a certain kind of polymorphous perversity and narcissism, which by liberating non-procreative eros, was his term, we would find great enlightenment and great happiness. This was supposed to be the key to utopia.
David Horowitz ties Eros and Civilization directly into the 60s rebellion he was part of.
Marxism is a bankrupt creed and was bankrupt by the 50s or earlier. People understood it didn't work. There was no working class that was going to make a revolution. Capitalism, people were happy with capitalism, basically because it spread more money to more people than any other system in history. So they tried to find other sources of revolutionary energy. And one was the idea of sexual repression on the 60s. I mean, it was a way of, people always think up complicated theories to, do what they want to do. People wanted to do a lot in the 60s, so Herbert Marcuse, gave them the intellectual justification for having a lot of sex with a lot of people, a lot of the time. That's what Eros and Civilization, that's the title of his famous book on it, is about.
Marcuse is also the source of one of political correctness's most notable characteristics, its total intolerance for any viewpoint but its own. Marcuse argued that our free American society was actually a deception, that its true tolerance is somehow repressive, while he argued for something called liberating tolerance.
And what he meant by that was liberating toleration or liberating tolerance meant intolerance from ideas and movements from the right and tolerance for any ideas from the left. It's a recipe for repression.
Even Martin Jay, a great admirer of the Frankfurt School, admits the totalitarian aspect of Marcuse.
Perhaps his most significant essay in terms of impact, the one we haven't even mentioned, an essay on repressive tolerance, written in the late 60s, which argued that because the tolerance of different beliefs produced no action at all, because every belief seemed to be equal to all others, and racist and neo-fascist and militarist beliefs were given equal weight to those that were pacifist and emancipatory. This led ultimately to the problems of political correctness and incorrectness in the 1980s. That is to say, if you had a strong notion of who was politically correct, you could then be intolerant of those who weren't. And sometimes this can be used as a license by people on the left to deny free speech to people they disagreed with.
Through these works, Marcuse became the main agent of transmission of the Frankfurt School's ideas.
Marcuse was a tremendously important influence on the thinking of young people in those days. He was one of the...
So I'm going to stop it there. It was only like a couple of minutes left there, but you got pretty much a good idea of this, how this group was made up of mostly pretty much all Jews. I mean, there's a few exceptions, but they came here to America. They established their goal, their stated goal was the destabilization of German society. We've talked about that, what was going on in Berlin prior to the rise of Adolf Hitler and the Nazism and all of that. You had different institutions that were there that were pushing things like in Berlin. They were had things such as, like I told you, they had what's considered the largest sex museum in the world at that time. This is in Berlin, and they said the closest in size that this museum came to was something the largest collection of sexual material. That's what it was in Berlin at this museum, and they said the closest match to it was in during the Roman Empire. They were pushing things such as experimentation on different. They were doing these social experiments where prostitutes. It wasn't just, oh, it's just a woman that, you know, you pay her money and that's it. They would say they had categories. They categorized these different things, you know, whatever your pleasure was, such as if the woman was handicapped. You know, if the person was handicapped, they established a category for that. Women who were handicapped, they had a category for women who were pregnant. If you like to get down with a woman that was pregnant, well, there was a category for that. Of course, men, women, children, and all this other stuff. They had all of that. Obese, all these different sexual fetishes. They were behind all of this stuff that was going on in Germany at this time. And this is all historically documented in this old documentary that we showed some time ago, and we shared it with you and everything, and it's out there, but we shared it with y'all as well. So this was what's going on, and this was causing this agitation. And then the people of Germany was like, listen, enough is enough. We're tired of this BS. You need to get up out of here. And that's where did they come? They came to America. They went to to establish the Frankfurt School to continue on what they were doing in Germany. Where else did they go? Well, they went to a place called, you may not have heard of it, Hollywood. They established root in Hollywood, and then they started putting out different ideologies within them films and stuff like that. Joel Stein of LA Times, he put the question out, who controls Hollywood? And he answered it. You can look up his article. This was an article that he wrote. I think it was in the 90s or something like that. It's still up. You can look it up. So they admit that this is the plan. This is what we've been doing all this time. Just a quick notes here. And then there's another thing I want to share with y'all on this. You notice they talked about Mark Cusick. He was, they saw how Marxism was dying out, because this whole working class versus the upper class and all that, everybody was doing well. People were making money. Society was doing pretty well. And so they said, okay, well, we got to get back, and we got to figure out, we got to create a new oppressed class. We got to figure out what's the next oppressed class. So they looked to women. They said women's rights, sexual revolution, sexual freedom. They looked to women. They started getting into that. Then they saw the movement that was already going on, that was with black folks. So they started getting involved and hitching their wagon to the black rights movement, civil rights movement. They started hitching their wagon to that. And if you know Martin Luther King, for example, many of his speeches was written by Jews, right? He also was under training he went to communist training. Martin Luther King did a lot of this stuff that he says. That's who was inspiring him. So this thing had really found its way and had really made the civil rights movement what it was, right? So here these people at the Frankfurt School, they started saying, okay, now we're going to move from the rich versus the poor. Now it's going to be colorism. Now it's going to be sexism. Now it's going to be this ism and that ism and that ism. That came from the Frankfurt School. Every time when you look at the news and you see, oh, the college campus is on fire, because, it's this whole thing against the Jews versus the Palestinians and stuff. And it's always taking place at the Columbia University. Why there? I mean, there's colleges and stuff around here. I don't really hear too much of that going on around here. University of Phoenix, I don't hear Arizona State. I don't hear anything going on. In Philadelphia, you may hear some things or whatever, but it's always focused on Columbia University. Why? Because Frankfurt School is there. That's their backyard lab. That's literally their backyard laboratory, where they can demonstrate this stuff and throw this stuff out and make it seem like all the college campuses are on fire and are hotly on this issue, when that's not even the case. But they use that as, this is their lab. You understand? I hope you guys are tracking with me. Anyway, so I have another. Now, this video is very short. This is much, much shorter. Let me see if I can pull this up here. Now, this is an older video, and this one features black folks who are talking about how they were in the communist movement, and they got up out of it because of what they saw. All right. So this video is much shorter than the one that I just shared with you, but let's take a listen to this video here.
I am Leonard Patterson. When I was a young man, only 23 years old, I joined the Communist Party. I was a member of the National Executive Committee of the American Young Communist League. In 1930, I was the official communist candidate for election to New York State Assembly. I knew Gus Hall and other top-ranking American communists very well because I trained with them at the Lenin University in Moscow. I joined the party because I honestly thought the communists were trying to help American Negroes. I broke away from the party when it became clear to me what the communists were really up to was to use the Negro people in this country as cannon fodder in a violent and bloody revolution aimed at the establishment of the American Soviet dictatorship. It was that simple, and it is still that simple today. Make no mistake about it. What is happening in the United States right now under the banner of civil rights is exactly what has happened in China, in Cuba, in Algeria, and many other places around the world.
I'm Julia Brown. For 9 years, I was a member of the Communist Party, serving as an undercover agent for the FBI. During that time, I learned that the communist conspiracy had been planning and working for years to bring violent revolution to America. It was to be a communist revolution, but the great majority of the American people would not be allowed to realize that until it had already happened. If all goes according to the communist blueprint, Americans will believe that the chaos and violence has something to do with civil rights. Our enemies were quick to find our weakest point for their attack. They knew that racial differences could provide them with an excellent wedge to divide our people. Their strategy simply has been to keep hammering on that wedge, to drive it deeper into our social structure, to open all wounds that have long since healed, and deliberately to create new ones wherever they can. Now, this doesn't mean that there isn't a legitimate need for the advancement of civil rights for many of our Negro citizens. Of course, there is a need there. Otherwise, communist agitators posing as civil rights leaders could never hope to enlist massive support for their schemes. The aspirations of Negroes for full equality were not created by communists, but they are used by communists in such a way that idealistic Americans of all races can be tricked into implementing the communist blueprint for revolution. Having been on the inside of the Communist Party, it's easy for me to recognize this revolutionary agitation in disguise. But the average American finds it's hard to believe that something as worthy and noble sounding as a civil rights movement could possibly be a communist maneuver.
Communism must be built with non-communist hands. The revolutionary accepts reform in order to use it as a cover for his illegal work.
By concealing the true communist objectives behind appealing slogans and pretended humanitarian goals, the conspirators are able to dupe hundreds of uninformed opportunists and misguided idealists into supplying the non-communist hands needed in the overthrow of this republic.
We can and must write in a language which sows among the masses hate, revulsion, and scorn toward those who disagree with us.
Members and front organizations must continually embarrass, discredit, and degrade our critics. When obstructionists become too irritating, label them as fascist or Nazi or anti-Semitic. Constantly associate those who oppose us with those names which already have a bad smell. The association will, after enough repetition, become fact in the public mind.
When I was studying communist tactics and strategy in Moscow, my instructors emphasized the importance of using honest grievances and popular slogans as a smokescreen to cover up the true nature of the revolution. We were taught how to use propaganda and arouse the emotion of the masses. We learned how to set one group against the other and to make them hate each other. We learned the necessity of having martyrs, and we were even told how to create our own martyrs if they did not immediately result from the atmosphere of hatred. We were taught the importance of getting large masses of people into the street for marches and demonstrations. And finally, we were instructed in ways to take off riots and make them spread and to keep them going. When I returned to the United States, I was immediately given practical training. I participated in so-called nonviolent demonstrations that were deliberately calculated to irritate white people into violence against us. I personally was in charge of organizing a march on Washington to dramatize the Scottsboro Boys case. In New York, about 1935, a Negro boy was reported killed by the owner of a store while in the act of stealing some merchandise. Communist Party headquarters decided to make a march out of the boy. So we went right to work, putting out handbills and holding open air meetings. In less than a half hour after we started, there was a race riot on 125th Street, complete with smashing windows of white storekeepers, looting and all the rest. I'm not speaking of things I read about. These are things I personally participated in.
Divide the people. Then create the appearance of popular support. And if any of the alert, informed citizens call attention to the true revolutionary goals behind the humanitarian slogans, move into phase 3 and neutralize the opposition. In the summer of 1965, a respected Negro farmer in Alabama dared to speak out critically against the civil rights revolutionaries. In this cabin in late August, 87-year-old Perry Smaw struggled with an assailant who said he had come to get Perry's tongue. The aged Negro's skull was crushed with a cast-iron frying pan, the attacker striking with such force that the skillet was broken. Then the intruder pulled Perry's tongue from his mouth and with a butcher knife cut it off all the way back to the old man's tonsils. Perry Smaw, the man who dared defy the conspirators, died 6 days later. By duping the American public into turning a deaf ear to the voices of warning because the topics were controversial or because the patriots themselves had been ridiculed as extremists, racists, fright peddlers, the conspirators were ready to move one step closer to their hidden goals by precipitating mob violence.
Riots, demonstrations, street battles, detachments of a revolutionary army. Such are the stages in the development of the popular uprising.
The Communist Party will educate and organize the working masses for mass strikes and mass demonstrations. It is through struggles that the working masses are prepared for the final conflict for power. As these strikes grow in number and intensity, they acquire political character through unavoidable collision and open combat with the capitalistic state. Mass action culminates in insurrection and civil war.
Well, there you go. I mean, that's a lot, man. That's a lot. So, so you heard how now you're hearing how they actually, infiltrated, the black community and started going in, and they saw the civil rights movement and where it was going and all that, because they said, like I said earlier, oh, the working class thing ain't working. Now we got to start moving to race. Now we got to start moving to sexism and all of that. And so another person, I'm not going to play their video, but I will just recommend, and I've talked about this person as well. You want to look up a gentleman by the name of Manning Johnson. Manning Johnson. All right. That's his name there. He put out a book called Color, Communism and Common Sense. You want to and it's free. It's here online. He was another black man who was taken to Moscow and was trained by these Jews basically on how to infiltrate the black church. He's very specific and very detailed. He talked about how, he even in his book, he talks about how different scriptures or how to manipulate scriptures to tie it in with the communist and Marxism ideologies. He's very specific on this. And so I'm bringing this up because we live in a day right now where we're seeing these same things happen. These same ideas that came to us by way of the Frankfurt School, focusing on the differences in different people in people, sexism, racism, and all of that, and making them into their own little side missions. We're seeing today, like, for example, this whole thing, I don't need a man. We see the whole the gender wars between black men and black women. And that's exactly what these people want. They want to see society break down. This is why and then when you look at, I mentioned this earlier, I said I was going to touch on this. What better way, going back to Julius Malema back in South Africa, who claims he himself is a descendant of these people. Well, if you can convince black folks to believe that, hey, this Bible here is actually talking about you, you're going to defend it, aren't you? You're going to defend it because they put in your minds that, hey, this is you. So you got to defend it, right? Well, it's the same thing they did with the Hebrew Israelite movement. You got black folks out here who have embraced this book and said, this is ours. We're part of, these are our people. This is our family. So they're going to defend it. And as much as, so on one hand, you got people, it can be confusing because you do have Hebrew Israelites who are out here who will call out Jews and say, hey, you guys are the fake ones, you're this and that or whatever. But at the same time, you're still defending the narratives that they've been putting out. You're still defending them. At the end of the day, the main narratives, when you go to a lot of these Hebrew Israelite channels, what are they saying? Death to America. We can't wait till America crashes and burns. America has to fall. Babylon has to fall and all of that. And if you've been following us for years, when we were in it, we were saying the same things. I'll tell you that in a moment, but it's true. Do you understand? We were there. We were doing the same things until we start reading, finding out and saying, hold on, wait a minute. We saying the same thing they're saying. How are we saying the same thing? We want the same goal, but yet they're not us. And you know what I'm saying? So we started realizing we paused and said, wait a minute. We shouldn't have the same goals here. Something ain't right. And so that's what we see. So you have numbers of black folks who have, if it's not in the Hebrew Israelite thing, even in the church, the black church, a lot of times you started seeing in the 1900s where particularly in the black church, in the 1900s, you started seeing a lot of black churches or preachers started preaching, like anytime when they talk about Moses and the Israelites and all of that, they will always say, well, that's just like black folk, ain't it? And, black folks, we embraced it as our own. Now, today, what do you see? Well, you see black preachers now, and we've talked about this in great extent here. Now you got black preachers out here who are now saying across the pulpit that we need to stand up for LGBT. They're very open about this, and they've been saying this. Let me see. I'm going to go into politics here. This is in Georgia. As soon as I can find it here. Okay, here it is right here. This is in Georgia. Let me try to pull this up here. In Georgia, state politicians, mostly black in Georgia, well, guess what they did? Guess what they pulled recently? Let me pull this up here for you. They walked out of the chamber to protest in protest of a Republican-backed bill to block taxpayer funds from being used to pay for gender-affirming care for guess who? For state prisoners. These black politicians got so mad that someone was taking a stance against providing gender-affirming care. In other words, gender reassignment surgeries. They got so mad, they walked out. This is them right here. Look at them. They just walking out, and there's going to be more of them. You're going to see a lot more of them. They're not all black, but they're mostly. They walked out because they got mad because they said, we cannot stand, we're not going to stand for gender reassignment surgeries to prisoners in the state of Georgia. And see, they're getting their little claps from the LGBT crowd because that's what they want. And then here's another one here. They rallying up. There you go. So this is what's being pushed now. So if you want to understand now why these different ideologies like the, LGBT, where does that come from? That just seemed like that came out of left field. Not really. It came from the Frankfurt School. And so now you got these disciples who oftentimes, a lot of them, they don't even realize they're disciples because this is a self-replicating thing. People just repeat things because I saw it on TikTok, or I saw it on YouTube, or I saw it on Facebook, or whatever. And they're just repeating these things, not realizing the origin of it. This is why, on this platform here, I know we go pretty long on our videos here, but it's a ton of it. It's a lot that you have to understand so that you know what you're talking about and what you're dealing with here and why these things are happening. You know what I mean? So now you got the historical, understanding, at least at this point in the video. We talked about the Black Panthers. Again, they latched on to this ideology. They were doing things for black people. They were establishing like, lunch rooms or lunch programs for black children in the hood and all that stuff. They were establishing libraries where black children can come and have a safe place to read and all of that. They were doing all that kind of stuff too. But the ideologies that they were holding on to came from them by way of the Jewish people through communism, Marxism teachings. Okay. The Black Panther Party, they also worked with another terrorist organization that was based here in the United States that was made up of a good percentage of Jews as well. You might have heard of them. It was called the Weather Underground. We could talk about that. The Weather Underground, this was a mostly Jewish organization that was terrorizing throughout the United States. They were placing bombs at public places. Before we had January the 6th, we had the Weather Underground, which is a mostly Jewish organization that literally placed a bomb and set it off in Washington, D.C. Did you know that? See, these are things that are all open. You can read it. It's nothing hidden about it. The only thing that's hiding this information is our willing ignorance. It's our willing ignorance because a lot of people don't want to know. And the powers that be, they just start a little something here, start a little something there, and next thing you know, you're distracted. But we're going to bring it back, and we're going to look at, okay, there's something going on. These aren't coincidences anymore. The reason why you got our children now that are out here and they're just well, I'm not, I don't feel like I'm, even though I'm in a boy's body, I don't feel like I'm a boy. I'm a girl. There's a tea place that I go to for some big old rusty, dusty looking person, got 2 pigtails, literally looks like a big old football player trying to play Holly Hobby. I'm not playing, I'm just saying. And literally got like 2 pink circles on his cheek, and he's like, hey, how you doing? Trying to have a feminine voice, and his voice deeper than mine. But where did these ideologies come from? Who was encouraging these things? It's the same group of people. Yeah, someone said, the Weather Underground also committed terrorism in New York City. Yeah, they were doing, these were Jewish people. They were doing this stuff. This is their history. So again, I'm talking through, I'm done here. But when you see like a lot of this contention between black men and black women, and, and the women saying we don't need men, and the men are saying we don't need y'all, and all of that, what the origins of that thinking, it didn't come from us. When you know your history, when you look at black history, we have a long established relationship with family. We are family oriented people. We were always about family. We were always about protecting our own. We were always about loving each other. We was always about telling the truth and calling the truth out for what it is. This is what we were doing. We were always doing this stuff. But once these people came along, all of a sudden the waters got muddy, didn't it? And this is why I fight hard against these, when people coming in and all of a sudden they want to bring in more confusion and like, well, we ain't got nothing to do with Africa at all. In fact, we came from here. Or in fact, we're the Aztecs, or we're this people, and we came from here, and we came from there, and all this stuff. And you just want to add more confusion to more confusion to more confusion. As long as your origin story is constantly being cut off by the kneecaps, you're always going to be in a state of confusion. Always. For some of y'all, I may be the last voice that you hear that's going to tell you the truth about this stuff. I'm just saying, I'm not lifting myself up. I'm just saying there are far too many people out here that want to point to all these other things here to get you distracted, but they don't want to sit down and walk through this stuff and tell you what's happening, how we really got to this point. So we have to start looking at this stuff historically. Take the time, go back through this video, research this stuff yourself. It's very easy to do. And now hopefully you have a better understanding of how we got to where we are today. All right. So that's all I have. It just really, it just really frustrates me when I see I'm tired of just feeling like I'm always sitting back and watching an accident going in slow motion. And it's just, what can you do? You know what I mean? But hopefully you got something out of this broadcast. Hope you do something with it. Study this stuff on your own, research it. It don't take all, you don't have to have a whole line of degrees to do this stuff. Just show some interest in it, show some interest in yourself, and let's make some course corrections so that we can be a better people, So that's all I have for you guys. Thank you so much for tuning in. You guys take care, and I will see you again soon. Take care.